So what I'll do today is I will take you through our Mifos Jira site. I'll give you some examples of how projects can be set up, etc. And then it will be very much an open floor for questions, problems, issues you've got, etc. And I will do my best to answer them on the fly, which is always interesting. So. Um, Let me share what Jira looks like, because obviously that's where we start. So hopefully what you're now seeing, I'll move it down so it doesn't look like I'm looking elsewhere, is a Jira landing page. And hopefully that is familiar to all of you. And that's what you want to see. Depending on how many projects you've got, yours may look slightly different to this. As you can possibly imagine, I've got quite a few projects. So on this screen, you might get some notifications down this right-hand side. Probably you'll get less of those than I will. But this is the bulk of where, when you land in Mifos Forge, things will be. Quite handily, it keeps everything you've most recently worked on at the top of the screen. So, for example, it shows you the five most recent projects that you've worked on. So you can see I've got GSOC Sandbox, which is a project you all have access to and can play with. You can't do any damage in there, so you can do what you like. We've got Web App. So copies works in Web App, for example, Mifos Gazelle, quite a few work in Mifos Gazelle, AI development, and Mifos X React, for example. Down the bottom here, you can also see the status of what you've been working on and what's assigned to you. So I dread to think how many tasks are assigned to me, but I can scroll down and see all the tasks that are assigned to me, whether in progress, backlog, or anything else. I can see what I viewed last, which is really handy if you go somewhere and you can't remember where you went to get there. You can always go back to what you viewed last, and you could equally go to what you've updated, created, done last as well. If you want to get to everything, you can do at any point. You can either click View All Projects up here, or you can go to the top here, which shows you all the projects, and you have the ability to star some as well if you want. As I said, you can see I have a large amount of projects because I'm a super user, so I can actually see all the projects. You should have slightly less, but starring a project is a good way, and it only affects your visibility to see the ones that you work on regularly, for example. So what I'll do today is I'll work in this project called GSOC Sandbox. As I said, you should all have access to this, so you can all have a play around and do it. Most of our projects have what we call a Kanban board. And when you first go into the project, it will show you what the default Kanban board is. There is a few projects we have that don't, and some projects have specific ones as well. So this has got what we call the default one, which has got to do, in progress, and to done. And you can even see on this one, sealed work items. So it's got a filter in place that says actually only show the last, once a task is done, file it away after a couple of weeks, effectively. Means it's still there, you can go and click on it. Some of our projects, though, are more complicated. So if I look at Web App, you can see the Kanban board has much more steps in it, depending on what's going through it. So you should all have something called an epic, basically. And that is pretty much the high level project you're working on. You might find a few of you are working on stories, depending on what you're doing. So Gopi in Web App probably is working on stories rather than working on an epic. Similar to any of you working in the mobile space, you're probably working on stories rather than epics because there's a flow and you're just doing a part of a bigger flow. But most of the other GSOC projects are epics at the top level. So you'll have one that basically says it's a big idea. You know, for you, it might be my big idea is I'm going to do Mifos Gazelle for ARM, etc. This basically should be assigned to you. So you can see this one isn't at the moment. It's just unassigned, but I can assign it to myself and you'll find your ones are assigned to you typically. And most of them should also have this label here. which says it's a C4GT GSOC project. That also means MSOC as well. It's just we didn't want to put the label across. The idea is that as you do your breakdown of your project and you set your tasks, all your stories should be under this big idea, and that'll help you break it down. It'll help you be able to understand how you're doing, and it'll help anybody else that's looking at what you're doing understand what you're doing as well. So at the moment, you can see I've got this big idea here, but there's absolutely nothing underneath it. So the first thing I would normally want to do is break this idea down into a few more things. Well, handily, I do have one, which I've done that on already. So here is an example project. And what I've done is I've created some sub-stories underneath. So I've said, I've got a big idea and I now need to break it down into some tasks of what I'm doing. So maybe my first task is I actually need to create a plan. My next task is I'm going to do some preliminary work and test out what I'm doing. I'm then going to build something, maybe my first function. Then I'm maybe going to test it. Then I'll probably maybe build something else, check how I'm doing, get to my project idea, document it. And you'll see you probably have things like prepare for your midterm demos, which I didn't put in the flow, and maybe even your final demo. So you'll all have a structure of stories, and they're the stories that you want to do. And yours will be much more technical. Mine are very high level generic type things here. So if I look at one of these, you can break it down again. So create my first plan. Well, what do I need to do? Well, first of all, I need to do my work breakdown structure. Then I need to populate it into Jira. And then I need to obviously agree it with my mentor. And you could even go into something like that and say, part of agreeing at my mentor is telling my mentor that they're actually available for review and getting my mentor's agreement. So you get the idea that on Jira, what you can do is you can have a big problem and you can start breaking it down into jigsaw pieces of varying levels to be able to do it. And that's kind of where you are at the moment. So you should all have that main story and you should all be thinking about, well, how do I split this down into chunks? And by splitting down to chunks, it enables you to know how you're doing through it, enables your mentors to maybe agree and interact on it, and everything else. So let's look at some more real examples as well. So if I flip across to my desktop, I'll find some that I've actually been interacting on recently. So profile demo creator, I know I've been interacting on here. So here is Yash's one. I don't know if Yash is on the call or not, but if so, you'll recognize it. So this is one about creating a profile demo creator. And as you can see, it's got a lot more description about what you're actually doing in it, as most of the rest of yours will. You could see he's actually got a broken down subtask to do, which is implement a config.ini. And you also have this ability to be able to start having a conversation with people as well. So you can see there's quite a conversation thread that's actually working here in Jira. And it may even go back quite a long way. So you can see it starts back in January with me and Tom bouncing around the idea, saying, well, how could we do it? Could we do it this way? Could we do it that way? And then you can see a discussion which Yash has been having. He tags people within it, which is great because you get notified. Trying to scope down what we're actually doing here. And there's a long thread here of discussion, if I remember correctly. And then the result of that is he's actually created another task here, which is something that he's going to be working on. Some of you will see there's lots of other fields on the right-hand side here as well. So you've got things like create branch, create commit, etc. Now, if you're working on GitHub and pushing things, when you normally push them, you should actually refer to a Jira ticket you're working to, and then you'll be able to see within Jira the status of how it's going. So if you look at a project that's actually managed very much that way, and web app is a really good example of that, we will see that in action within web app as well. So let's look at a done task. And we can see here, this is a task that Felix has done. So he's got a description. He's attached some screenshots of what he needs to fix. He's got some narrative here with one of the other contributors that he's having here, but you can see he's actually tagged this story Web 181 when he's put his GitHub pull request through. And that means this is updated and it can actually see the commits sat underneath it, and it can actually see the pull request merged in. So as you actually get to doing the coding and pushing things in your repos, if you use your story reference number within those pull requests, we actually start to get this tracking ability between the two as well. So let's go back to our play sandbox, first of all. So I've kind of shown you what it should all look like, but I've not shown you how to do it. So if you've got an epic, the first thing to probably do is say, I want to break that down a bit. So what you've got is multiple different levels of things you can do. So epic is kind of your big one. Bugs, probably not that relevant to what you're doing at the moment. Stories is the level below epic. So normally an epic will be a big idea, a story will be a small idea, and then the story you can break down into tasks, and then tasks you can even break down into subtasks if you want. So let's create a story for our big idea. So what we'll say is, I want to build a mock screenshot for my project UI. There we go. I'll write a bit more description in there. So I need to take my existing ideas and place them into a Figma diagrams so I can share it for approval. Now, what you'll see there is I've just written it, but actually there's kind of an unwritten rule in Jira to writing good stories. And that is, first of all, you should say, what is it you want to do? Why are you doing it? And kind of the outcome you expect. Okay. And the reason we do that is your outcome can become your test criteria, basically, at the end of it. You might hear it also referred to as acceptance criteria if you're doing strictly agile terminology. So one way that you can always try and keep in this narrative is to think of who am I, why am I doing it, etc. So you might write your stories as a end user. I want to be able to have an easy interface to my big idea so that I can see the status of the idea, click on actions, load data, for example. And these are all nice and easy, so you can make them like things. So you can see what I've done here is I've defined the what, I've defined the what I need to say, and why. So I want to have these in place, my big ideas, so that I can effectively. So you don't have to strictly follow those rules, and you'll find people do varying levels. And as you get lower and lower in your breakdown, it gets pretty hard to write it in a sort of third-party external narrative. But certainly when you're working at epic level, that's what we try to do in the impact statements, etc. So that's our project, our shorter story. You've got lots of different things. So you can say this has been split from or broken down from, effectively. So I will say it is. I'll do split from, and I'll find my work item, which I know is my big idea project. And I will assign it. I'll find a random person to assign it to, whoever's first on my screen, which is yourself, Abhinav. So let me see if I can find, different Abhinav, but I'll assign it to Abhinav Kumar today. Labels, these are generally pre-selected, so but you could create your own label or tag. They're generic across everything, so if you want to go and filter and see things. But I will, for the moment, I'll just say it's part of the C4 GTG SOC, and I'll explain why later. You could use sprints if you want, but I don't think any of you are going to be in sprint planning, etc. So I can create my story. And we can see it's created this idea, and I can go and view it, copy the link, or I can find it somewhere in here. There we go. And here's my story. So if I want to go into my story, I could now break this down a bit further, for example. So we can see it's linked, okay? But we could also do actions. So I can, add. So I can go and say I want to break down and make some subtasks or some linked items. So I say I want to break some subtasks. And so the first one is set up Pigmo account. You can see I can't type live. I want to give access to my teammates. I want to upload my flow, get feedback, and publish B1, for example. And then you can see I've got all these nice little tasks sat here, and I can, again, we can assign them to myself, for example, and I can say, I'm working on that at the moment, so I can put it in progress. Now, if we come out of this story, it automatically saves where you are. You'll notice, get rid of some of these notifications because I created lots of items there. You can see that we're all sat here, but hopefully we should be able to see that this one is in progress. So if I reload my board, hopefully that should populate in the in progress. There we go. You can see my subtask is sat here in the in progress. You can also, don't generally recommend it because it's easy to go wrong, but you can actually drag it. So if I've completed that, I could move it up to done, for example, or I can say, actually, I made a mistake and I didn't do that, and it's all the way back to do, etc. So this is kind of the power of what you've got. You can also filter. So if you want to see only stuff that relates to you, I can click on that, and I can suddenly I'm only seeing what relates to me rather than what I assigned to Avanav, or put them both on. So you can click off, click on, etc. Or the unassigned, which shows me everything. And you can even, if you really need to, you can set up your own board of your own tasks. And we do that using those taggings or the search criteria. So you can see here's one I did earlier, which will now explain why I've done that. These look across all other projects, for example. So what you'll see here is I'm seeing every task and every story that's actually been tagged to the C4 GT stroke GSOC thing. And within here somewhere, I think it was this one that I added the tag to earlier, you can see I've suddenly found it again. So Jira is quite powerful. It's got lots of little nuances as well, I'm afraid, but it should give you a way that you can actually start breaking down your stories, creating your own view and your own work plan, and start going through it while still be part of a bigger work plan. So as we said, you've got stories here, for example, that sit in, if I find one of the Gazelle ones. So these are Gazelle ones. So this might look a really isolated story that Joshua's working on. But actually, if I go and look at my Mifos Gazelle project, we can actually see that story is actually part of a much bigger picture around what's happening with Gazelle and where things are heading. So, for example, you can even see in here, if I can find it, here is our next release of Gazelle, and you can even see some of the work that's kind of earmarked towards that release. Although some of these might move out to later releases, etc. So you can see all the work items tagged against the release. You can see those that are blocking it at the moment, etc. So quite a powerful tool on Mifos Jira. So I've talked far too much there, and I'm guessing you've probably all got some I tried to do this and it didn't work, or how do I do this type question. So if I open up the floor for any questions anybody's got, I will try and work them out and solve them.
I have a question. So
Sure.
now, when we are contributing to our projects, for each of the
Yep.
PR, do we have to create a separate ticket?
No, you could have a PR that points to, well, you can have multiple PRs that point to a same ticket. That is possible. Normally, I would suggest if you're doing a PR, it's probably broken down to be a task by the nature of you've got something to contribute back. But yeah, you could have multiple PRs. I don't know if I've got any examples of that. So look at web app is probably one of our most active ones at the moment. This one might have multiple PRs, as I can see. Yeah, so this one's got 3 PRs set against it, for example. And you can see the status of all of those. So 1 was declined and 3 were merged that fulfilled what that ticket was effectively. We looked at one of those where you'd actually see. Let me go there. You'll see it actually takes me to GitHub as well. And I can see it, and you can see here's where they've tagged it. So that's why it's pulling through, because they've actually put that story number in from Jira. We have a link between our Jira and all of our GitHub. Doesn't matter what repo you're in, it would work for you. Any other questions? Yeah, go for it, yeah.
In my assigned ticket, you mentioned that some sub tickets may need to be in other projects, such as web app, if you alter the UI. So does
Yeah.
it mean that I can assign one task to 2 epics or something like that?
Yes, you can. So let me go back and give an example of that. So if I go back to my GSOC sandbox, I'll go back to the whiteboard, for example, here. So say, actually, in my big idea, I actually want to deploy something in Mifos Gazelle. Mifos Gazelle is its own project elsewhere. So I'd still link to it, but I might link to a different story. So if I go, and apologies, I will flip around a little bit here whilst I do it. So if I create a task in Mifos Gazelle, so it's Gaz74. So we can see my task and it sits in the Mifos Gazelle queue. Now, if I go back to my epic, my big idea. So here I am in my sandbox project. I can say actually a linked work item. It to as 7.4. And we can see we've gone cross project at this point. So you can have, your epic at the high level, but actually need to do something in one of the other projects as well to do it. And you can go cross epic within it as well. So any other questions?
Hey David, I had another question.
Yep, sure.
So I've created a few tickets in Fineract. I was wondering
Mhm.
if we could add those as well into our projects.
That's an interesting question because Fineract is not in Mifos. So I don't believe, but I've never tried it, so we will see. I don't think you can go outside of Mifos Jira. Let me have a look and see. Do you happen to know a number of any of the Fineract tickets or not?
Yeah, let me just share it with you. I just wrote it down in the chat.
Yep, that's fine. Fineract 2309. I'll try it and see. I've never tried. No, it can't. So it's in another site effectively. So no, you can't link to Fineract level tickets. Anything within Mifos you can, but as Fineract is within the ASF project, no, you won't be able to do that.
All right.
What you could potentially do, so I think I have access to Fineract, so let me see if I can. So this is your story in Fineract, effectively. So what I could do is copy this link here. And then if I go back to my story here, I could, either within the comments, I could actually paste the link, and you will find it actually resolves it to be the actual story, or I could even put it in my description. Again, it resolves the story at that point. So it just doesn't have the ability to do that cross-linking in that sense, but you can still do it within your comments, etc. So, any other questions? Nope. Okay. So my suggestion would be have a play. If you're worried about doing it on the main ticket you've been assigned, then come into this sandbox. I have given you all access, I believe, to the sandbox. So you can come in, you can create yourself a big idea. So you could select Epic for the big idea. You can say, you know, I'll take Craig's big idea, for example, because I can see you on my screen. Create. Oh, it's very good. Does tell you if you don't fill something mandatory in. Now you can see you've got in here Craig's big idea, and then you could go and play and do linking, etc. So feel free within this sandbox. There's nothing you can do to break anything else, and I can always wipe it down again and all the rest of it. And then get on with your own projects. You know, as you get problems, you know, trying to link something or anything else, just feel free to reach out to me in any of the Slack channels, and I'm sure I'll be able to fix it and help you to get through it. As I say, Jira is one of those things you learn by playing, really.
David, I
If
don't
there's
think I've been added to the sandbox.
haven't you? Oh, let me have a look at that then.
Oh,
Looks like you are. Can you try? Oh, not that page. I think. Project. Get to a generic thing in a sec. You put that in the wherever the chat's gone. Can you see if you can click on that link and it takes you to it, Abhinav?
oh, yeah, David, it's working. Thanks.
It's working, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
It may just be that it's not, probably isn't showing in your top page up here because you've not been to it yet. But if you clicked on this view all projects, you'd get a list of the projects you're able to access. It would hide and you're not able to access effectively to be able to find it. But okay, if there's no other questions, I'll let you all get on. Have a play. And as I say, if you get any issues, just reach out to me and I will try and help you.